another. Mainstream media. Government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
And quite conveniently, they caught a retarded Dutch youth who was carrying on his person a Communist Party card, just kind of like on 9/11 when all the planes and the hijackers and all those people just burned up, but they found a paper passport that they said belonged to one of the hijackers. So Hitler, who at that time was chancellor, which is somewhat like our vice president, he said, well, give me the power and I will, protect you from these communist terrorists. And, of course, it later came out that basically the Nazis themselves had set the fire.
Goering.
But yes, because it could be tracked back to Goering's office. And then, but using that as a pretext, they rushed through emergency legislation, the Enabling Act, just like they rushed through the Patriot Act for us, and they began to consolidate power within the government, and before long, Hitler had combined the offices of president and vice president.
All right, Jim. Jim Marrs, New York Times best-selling author, the man who brought you JFK the movie, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, when we get back.
Right hand sent a Louisiana fella to the promised land, Big John.
All right, I apologize to Jim Marrs, but he was happy to do it for Ron Paul to pop in with that emergency report. He'll be back with us next week. Talk about some exciting things behind the scenes. I'll just leave it at that as he hurries off to the committee meeting. I'm going to keep Jim a little bit in the next hour. Then we got Bob Chapman coming on so we can finish up with getting into his new incredible book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. We had gotten up to Hitler seizing power through staged terrorism. Jim Marrs, a best-selling author, please continue.
Well, what you have to understand is that Hitler wasn't able to take over Germany just by himself or by a handful of people in German industry. The banks that bankrolled them and the Dawes Plan and the Young Plan, which generally pushed the Germans into Hitler's hands, were all products of J.P. Morgan. The German corporations who are all behind Hitler are, of course, the ones you would think: IG Farben, Zeiss, Icon, Bosch, Daimler-Benz, Krupp, Alliance Insurance, which, by the way, was one of the insurance companies that insured and made lots of money off the destruction of the World Trade Center. They were in collaboration and business relationships with Standard Oil of New Jersey, J.P. Morgan, Brown Brothers Harriman, JF, IBM. IBM, for example, closed their Berlin office during World War II, but they kept their Warsaw office open, and it was through the Warsaw office answering directly to their New York office, where they processed the punch cards for IBM machines that allowed the Nazis to round up dissidents and Jews and everybody else and get them on the trains to the concentration camps on time. And what people don't realize is that, yes, we defeated the Germans in World War II, but none of these people at that level, at the business level, none of them were ever charged. None of them ever saw any problem. In fact, a General Motors plant, which finally, towards the end of the war, because it was cranking out war materials, finally was bombed by the U.S. Air Force. And after the war, General Motors sued the U.S. government and won reparations and was repaid for the loss of their manufacturing plant there in Germany, which had been producing war materials to kill our boys.
By the way, now, GM is still in Europe. It's called Opel.
Right. Right, and it's all there. In fact, when you look at the world situation today, we see that the Nazis are not very far behind most everything. We have a new pope who, as a youth in Poland, was a member of the Hitler Youth.
And by the way, you would think that Italy has free speech. You are arrested there if you write about that on the internet or in a newspaper. You can look that up. If you talk about Ratzinger being a Hitler Youth, and now Tony Blair's become, and I'm not attacking Catholics, it's just a fact, folks. They are there.
Yeah, today you try to bring out truth, and somehow they twist it around to making it a hate crime, you know. I don't hate the Pope. I don't wish him ill. I'm simply pointing out that he was a Hitler Youth, and that's true.
But and let me expand on that. Let's stay on the Catholic Church for a moment, but I want to go back first, Jim, because this is so important. The entire Nazi mechanism, as Lord Milner wrote, Royal Institute of International Affairs, as you know, they were saying in the 20s, we need some hothead to take over, fascism, tear Europe up, so they could then suck it dry. So Hitler was just like the venom a spider injects into a bug to liquefy Europe, bring down its middle class, and then sanguinate it, suck it dry back into England and the United States through the Anglo-American establishment. You have the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, and by the way, I'm half German, folks. I'm not bashing Germans. It's the German elite. We're not bashing Germans either here. We don't want to get into balkanization. It's just a fact that we're laying out here. So basically, Germany was used to tear up, bring down Europe, beat up communism, their other creation that had gotten a bit out of control, and to bring them back to heel, and then to suck all that wealth from looting Europe back into the handful of the Fortune 10 in England and the United States, and that is now exactly what they did. They also took all the brain trust of the Nazi technicians, engineers, scientists, and took them back, as your book covers. I just want the audience to understand that it isn't like the Nazis came over here and took over. The Nazis were the creation of the people running the United States and England, and so they basically used the Nazis as their device to implode Europe. Is that an accurate statement?
That's absolutely correct, Alex. I'm glad you got that. A lot of people see my title, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, and they read about the Nazi rat lines and how that they got over here on Vatican passports, and they have the idea that, it's some sort of German Nazis that came over and took over the United States. No, it is the financial elite, the wealthy oligarchy that created first communism and then got fearful of communism, created National Socialism, or the Nazis. You're absolutely correct. In fact, these globalists, as they call themselves, realized by late 1940 that Joseph Stalin, who had taken control over communism in Russia, was threatening to invade Europe and conquer Europe for communism. He had realized that nobody in Europe was going to voluntarily vote communism in, so he was prepared to launch a massive assault on Europe in July of 1941.
Barbarossa.
The only force that could possibly have resisted this was the German army, and yet they were so vastly outnumbered, particularly in tanks. The Russians had 22,000 tanks, and the Germans had 3,600, that the only option left was for Hitler to launch a preemptive strike in June of 1941, which he did with Operation Barbarossa, and this explains how the Germans were able to crash through the Russian lines and encircle whole armies, because the Russians were in jump-off offensive positions, not defensive positions.
They were already forward. They did blitzkrieg and did end-runs around their supply lines.
Exactly.
And that's why when they grabbed Heinrich Himmler, British intelligence, they immediately killed him because they were in secret communication. This has now been declassified the entire time with the British, saying, why did you double-cross us? This was all a set-up deal we had. That's why Hess flew in and parachuted down onto one of the castles, and then they grabbed him and locked him up in the tower, saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? We had a deal.
Exactly, and then when they did try to move Hess out of England to form a new British government that would overthrow Churchill and the War Party and try to bring peace between England and Germany, the plane crashed, and Hess apparently was killed, so they couldn't admit to any of this, so they had a brainwashed patsy who served the rest of his life in Spandau prison. And the reason I say a brainwashed patsy is because Alan Dulles, who had been an integral part of all of this since the time he represented Hitler and the Schroeder Bank and backer of Hitler, sent Dr. Ewan Cameron to inspect Hess in Spandau after the war because he said he thought this was an imposter. And Hess had known scars from wounds in World War I, and he wanted Cameron to go and see if that was it. Well, and interestingly enough, the British who were guarding Hess at the time refused to let him inspect Hess. But the key thing there is that any competent doctor could have checked for scar tissue on Hess. Why did he send Dr. Ewan Cameron? Because Dr. Cameron was a mind control expert.
And by the way, this is even on the History Channel. In the 60s, tens of thousands of people, the MK Ultra program in Canada, it's all admitted, and that's why they used German mind control scientists after that. Understand, the King of England was a Nazi. When the war started, he had to get out of Germany through Spain. They had a totally different plan. That's why suddenly the German princeling, now the head of the House of Orange, married to Queen Beatrix, founder of the Bilderberg Group, and also a Vatican agent, he had to then escape out of the country. And, of course, you can tell people about who that is.